hit the subscribe button and the notification bell right now so you never miss an episode of Operation Truth. Send us an email, ask your questions, and very possibly we'll address your question on the air.
Operation Truth, the show they don't want you to see. Now, here's your host, Lou.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lou Palumbo. With me today again, and as always, is my co-host, Tom Fuentes, former assistant FBI director, very distinguished career historian, and I just found out he's into photography. He volunteered that during one of his numerous visits abroad. In any case, I want to start out with this discussion, as I always do with this immigration issue. You know, what we're starting to live in America is what I call the big lie. One of the big lies is the border. We listened to Mayorkas about a month ago tell us the border is closed. Well, maybe he can account for why we had 260,000 people cross the border in September. By the first 17 days of September, we had 142,000 individuals cross. I don't even know if that incorporates the gotaways. But guys, I've been telling you this for 2 years now. And it's starting to resonate throughout the country, not just in areas that are Republican-driven, but Democrats. This is a domestic issue right now. We are in peril. If you don't believe me, go talk to the governor in Massachusetts, talk to Eric Adams. Maybe you want to talk to Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, who just deployed the National Guard to the city of New York. That's how grievous this problem is becoming in New York. But let us just keep lying to you about this. What we're really trying to do, ladies and gentlemen, is find out who is supposed to benefit from this? I'm really curious. I am perplexed. Who is supposed to benefit from this? Who's supposed to be benefiting from allowing the criminal element to act with impunity in your major cities? Who is supposed to benefit when you shut down the Keystone Pipeline the first day into office? I'm just asking these rather interesting questions. Afghanistan, who is supposed to benefit with this botched withdrawal that above all things threw the women and the young girls in that country back into the arms of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda? Tell me who's supposed to benefit. You know, we're all worried about the $85 billion in weaponry left there, and we should, and the closing of Bagram Air Base, which we should, strategic in value. But who's that supposed to benefit? I'm getting into this mode of who's supposed to benefit. Maybe we should open a show in that regard. I do want to talk real quickly about this issue involving this Congressman Jamal Bowman. I guess his prior experience as a principal in a school didn't lend itself much to fire safety. So I want to show you something interesting. And this is about a big lie and insulting our intelligence. This, ladies and gentlemen, if you can see it, is the device that was pulled by the congressman while they were trying to vote on preventing the shutdown of the government. Take a good look, guys. That's the device. This is the device that an alleged congressperson, Cortez, tried to explain to you was done accidentally, that he was in a panic, in a frenzy, in a foyer. If you'd look to your right off that right shoulder, Congressman, or whatever you purport yourself to be, you would have noticed 2 doors on a crash bar. Could have walked right out. We know what's driving this. What they were trying to do, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm no fan of the Republicans, so let me be clear, was bring this economy to a halt and then politicize it once again, like we did with the virus, and lay it off on this administration with the congressional, the House of Representatives being dominated by the Republicans. That was what this is about. You know, this is shameful. This country is becoming one big lie. Your borders, your cities, gun control, transitioning into electricity, everything what we touch upon today becomes a gigantic lie. Nothing is driven by the truth. It's driven by agenda. I'm going to go on with this today if time allows. There's so much to talk about. I do want to mention something about Elon Musk, who I happen to like. He mentioned or made a comment that anybody productive, hardworking, and honest should be allowed into the country. Well, that's a really novel notion. Myself, Tom, we spoke about this. We agree. It's only one little problem. We have no ability to vet anybody coming into the country. And we're not vetting anybody coming into the country. That's a fact. That's not a lie. The big lie is we are vetting them, which is what they'd like you to believe. There are no databases, no policies that they embrace exchange of information. And by the way, they're changing their identities multiple times. Driver's licenses and birth certificates are being fabricated as you brush your teeth every morning. So please tell me how we can distinguish between those who are viable candidates to come into the country and those who are not. And while we're on the topic, just real quick, has anyone considered maybe we've overpopulated the country? Guys, we're not taking care of the people here. Our homeless, our mentally ill, shamefully, our veterans, and we don't protect our children. We talk about it, but we don't. A lot of transitions or tangential issues attached to a lot of these discussions. I want to go right to Christian Briggs right now because I want to get in discussion with him about this Neuralink. This is something that he dropped in my lap, to be candid with you, about a week or so ago, and it raised my curiosity. So, Christian, can you give us a little background on what this exactly is about, this Neuralink?
Sure, Lou. I'm glad to be on the show. I don't know how much your listeners actually want to know about this, but I'll give them the 411 on it. You know, when the idea started with a programmable chip that's inserted in some part of the body, the brain was determined to be one of the most, I would say, realistic or reliable. I don't know which of the two, but both words were used within the context of what they were trying to accomplish. So a reliable and realistic expectation on this was it would be able to, because a lot of companies are able to read the thoughts of minds now, and people can actually read minds. Let's just say for what it is, from the Twilight Zone all the way fast forward to today, the programmable chip that would be implanted inside a brain was determined to be a medical breakthrough. In other words, where drugs or surgeries might have fixed or certainly minimized some of the detrimental damage from either birth defects or injuries, the Neuralink implanted chip was determined to offer other types of non-invasive or non-surgical, like long-term recovery surgical methods to relieve different things like paralysis or Parkinson's. Like Michael J. Fox obviously had different types of ailments, then they were able to relieve some of that through extracting part of the brain matter and limiting some of the dysfunction that are characteristics with these ailments. Well, the Neuralink would go in there and program various ways to get the brain to rethink, to realign through electrodes and various electrolysis, and thus creating a medical breakthrough. Sounds great in theory. And it really is a great in theory. And as long as it's used exclusively for medical transitions, in other words, transitions from where you have debilitating diseases or loss of body functions, and you're using the Neuralink implantable brain, programmable brain chip, lack of a better definition or description, it is great, and it will help, promising from paralysis to quadro to or quadriplegic, all the way to dementia and Parkinson's, head injuries, trauma. These things have had the opportunity where the Neuralink could and should be able to help in some level. We're not sure what that level is until long-term studies, but the good news is, in a way, it is starting to move forward. They've now been approved to start human trials, and it will be one of those long-term tests. Now, long-term with this kind of a medical breakthrough or medical device, so that's what it is. We'll call it a medical device for now. And we'll call it BCI, which is what they call a brain-computer interface. And that's really what this thing is. As long as it stays in the hands of somebody who's qualified for medical, has the empathy to understand and the knowledge and intellect that it's for medical and not programmable human behavior that goes beyond medical, it sounds like a great breakthrough. But we all know human nature is the least predictable, and sometimes it's the most predictable. So let's take the predictability side of this and say, if somebody out there decides one day the Second Amendment and these gun laws are bad, and somebody who had some medical need for this BCI, brain-computer interface, and they decided that, well, that person is a judge who might have a decision to, or a brief that's being read and a decision to be made in his court, that the Second Amendment is not needed anymore and gun laws are not needed, or it could be free speech is not needed. With the turn of a switch, a little typing, and it says, say no to Second Amendment, say no to the First Amendment. Next thing you know, this person who's a position of power and authority to make those decisions says, we don't need no First Amendment. We don't need no Second Amendment. Next thing you know, got First or Second Amendments. So that's the problem. Where's the Chinese wall? Who's going to determine the medical needs versus the social or business needs that could be used as a way to create programmable human beings, like in the terms and words that were actually said by members of the World Economic Forum? One day, very soon, we'll all have implantable chips in their brains, and people will conform to the ideologies of the 1%. And that's where we are here today.
So to kind of give a quick synopsis, we're worried about misapplication and hacking. Am I correct, sir?
I don't know if it's hacking. I think it is. It's ideology that actually is foretold biblically that could happen and will happen. I guess the theory of chaos, whatever was inevitable, will happen. And we just have to be conscious enough to know that when it does happen, not act surprised, because we knew it was coming. And so hacking is one thing that's done in a legal basis into a software system. This may not be hacking. This could be actually the willful intent to control the populations of the world through a system that they would never realize they're being controlled by.
How far along is this, Christian? How far along is this project? I know you mentioned in conversation with me that we've already had some volunteers, and apparently there's compensation attached to this. Is that correct?
Yeah. In fact, I signed up you and Thomas for this research and implement today. So it's that far along. You guys are scheduled to go in this Thursday for your brain implant.
Tom's going first, though. And I want to see how well it works.
Tom said you're going first. Wait a second.
Well, I say
you'd literally be a chip off the old block, Blue.
That's right.
a joke, Tom. I like that.
Yeah, that's good, Tom. I told you Tom has a hell of a sense of humor. Good job, Tom.
I agree. You, best is when he smiles. And you just got to say something on the cusp of funny, and that'll happen for you.
Absolutely.
So in addition to this, the concerns that you've outlined, any other discussions about implanting chips in human beings for other purposes other than this Neuralink?
Yes. Well, World Economic Forum has a whole study on it. If you go to their website or go to do a search online for the World Economic Forum, WEFs, it's their overview of programmable chip programming within human beings and how everything will be programmed on the chip, from travel to your bank account to your social interactions, your friends. You think it. The centralized systems that are then empowering the chips will open the doors for you. Literally, the thought process behind it is the thought process that most human beings don't need to think about something. They just need to be told to do. So WEF, working in conjunction with a lot of the largest tech companies in the world, which have sponsored the research and development of these types of technologies and chips, have determined that most people, in the words of Obama, are too small-minded to govern their own affairs, that with the help and the understanding of one sovereign government is what's needed to ensure the viability of all human beings, even with the depopulation system that's now largely been overlooked, which the World Economic Forum has obviously been advocating for years. So think about that for a second. When you have programmable chips, depopulation systems, where Obama said in a speech in Belgium years ago in Brussels, said that people are just too small-minded to govern their own affairs. So think about that for a second. And then next thing you know, look where we are today.
It's interesting, that comment made by Obama, because I guess rather than continue to educate people and broaden their thinking, which is part of what the learning process is about, learning institutions, the shortcut to that is to implant chips so we can control you. Very interesting approach to things. Interesting that you mentioned Obama, because for everybody that's not understanding what we're living today, festered during the Obama administration. He clearly came out and said we were going to redefine America. Maybe this is part of that definition. Possibility?
Transformation, absolutely. Transformation from a society where small government is governed by the large population to large government, depopulation, and the people who are able to stick around will then act and behave as any other comrade of China or Soviet Union should, which is the behavior patterns will be dictated by the policies of the government.
It sounds like what we're going to do is create a bunch of robots. Am I correct?
Yes. I mean, like Biden, when he comes off the podium and kind of does this kind of crazy shit. The hell is this? Did you see Trump mimic him the other day? Hey, where am I? Oh, wait, I'm not Biden. I'm Donald Trump. Oh, yeah, I'm over here. He was walking around the stage like this. You gotta love
So
it.
let me ask you another question. How does this discussion intersect with AI? And does it?
Of course, it is AI. It's the programmable understanding to quantitative computing, which is basically quantitative computing is the mass computing power of millions of computers in a single centralized systems that have trillions of able-bodied systems that enact together to create problem solving that tens of thousands of computers could never solve. Okay, so that means is you now have the understanding that where if you have these things happen, in theory, is now become more conclusive based when theories go away and conclusions become now the standardized systems. So you can literally program people to do something, and you know the outcome is going to be exactly what's expected because they're programmed like robots, and they're programmed to live in their 15-minute cities, buy these foods, eat those crickets, don't eat meat, don't travel, your bicycle is your best friend, government your God, and everything that you do or say has been predetermined based on an outcome and conclusion that they know is conclusive.
So the question is, should we throw the brakes on? Can we throw the brakes on? And without question, my personal opinion is that we shouldn't even entertain this, because part of the problem with mankind is we seem to bastardize everything good that crosses our nose, whether it's technology, different forms of science. We look to monetize it, and we also look to use it as a tool to control. And that's really what we're talking about here.
Control. The word control is the ultimate word. It has been for what, 5, 6, 7,000 years, Lou? Thomas, you've been around long enough. We all have. We've read books. We've seen it.
Tom's not that old.
Not that long, but
he's not that
we've
old.
read a lot of books. Tom's only slightly older than myself. Okay, so 4,000 years, like me.
Okay, that's better. That's better.
But with that said, I would have to say, and I say this with moderation being that we can slow it down. We may be able to stop it. When people realize that chamber, when they're handing you a bar of soap, is not a shower, but rather something more sinister. If people knew before they walked in that they could make a choice and run for the doors and the exits, they probably would. The thing is knowledge is power. The people that are doing this have unbelievable knowledge, creating the power by the very fact of what their intent is. And now they're running this thing. I mean, this Neuralink, Friday last week when it went, or was it Thursday, Friday, whichever last week, when they said it's ready for human trials, you're talking about a programmable brain in I don't want to say an insert or a something that goes beyond what words can captivate, because you now can take a human being, get on a keyboard, centralize it with millions, if not billions of people. Think of everybody as the new distribution platform for far left communist agenda. They can say and program anything just with the typing and the keypad. Go kill your mother. Go do this. Go do that. I mean, the most horrific things in the world can be accomplished now at your fingertips from anywhere in the world. And they centralize money. That's coming. They're centralizing all power through human interaction and programmable brain chips. And soon the healthcare system will be centralized into national systems, kind of like what they have in England and Canada, which is horrifically great, full coverage, but poor quality of care. So this is what's happening. So look at all of the dominoes here that are falling. Look at the dots that are being connected. The last thing to do is program the brains. I don't know what's left for human interaction, left for consciously making your own decisions when you can't anymore.
You know what the real unfortunate part of this conversation, if people are following it, there's a big advantage in the area of treating illnesses, Alzheimer's, dementia, any number of conditions that we take on through the period or window of our life. And the unfortunate part of the conversation is that we will eventually figure out a way to misapply, bastardize, monetize, and use this for the wrong purpose, which is something that we have traditionally done through mankind. I just want to ask you about the military-industrial complex. Any use? Their purposes.
So about 20 years ago, maybe a bit long, could have been as high as 25 years ago, China started experimenting with altering the DNA in embryos both cloning as well as re-engineering the modifications to muscle tissue and stripping out really empathy and emotions in men. And you can go online and see, I think YouTube may still have the videos up. Go look at the 6'5" to 7 foot Chinese military men that were basically grown in a petri dish. These things are monsters. They're unbelievable. So when you look at the military application, if you create this 300-pound, 7-foot monster who knows one thing to kill, but kills on order or kills on predetermined programming, this chip is perfect for the military, perfect for building soldiers whose actual viability is based on killing, no empathy, just kill and take out anybody and everybody you can that's deemed to be the enemy based on programming it. So the military aspects of this is unlimited. You could put this into servicemen and women all over the world in any army, any situation. The outcome is the same. They will kill and they will know no other order. So that's what's coming, and that is certainly going to be a part of this thing. There's no question the Department of Defense probably has their hands on a lot of this, and they're testing with it right now.
Tom, I want to ask you to get involved in this conversation. Tom, go ahead, buddy. I wanted to ask you your perception and your opinions on this conversation.
I was just going to say, when the Chinese hosted the last Olympics, they made each of the athletes and coaches provide DNA samples. And the reason the government of China has been talking about that, they actually regard their young men as being too feminine or too, not really good warriors. And they attribute that to that a lot of the Chinese parents both had to work, and therefore young boys were being raised by their grandmothers that spoiled the hell out of them and, made them effeminate, made them weak and all of that. And the Chinese government's been trying to find a way to alter their DNA so that their young men can become warriors instead of just good little grandchildren at home. So that's been something that they've been looking at very seriously now for many years.
I wonder if our government is exploring that as a possibility as well. Maybe it would be easier to control you guys in the FBI if we put chips in you.
That'd be fine. There's a few people I'd like to have a chip put in.
Well, guys, we're going to take a quick break. This is Operation Truth. You can find us at operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. We want you to become part of this conversation. And by the way, this conversation is your wake-up call. Please listen to what Christian has to say and the impressions of Tom as well. It's going to be very beneficial to you in the future. More to talk about. We're going to come right back to you. Just stay with us, guys.
The change from currency systems to fully digital cashless societies has intensified fear around the world. In mid-September, Wells Fargo and Truist banks planned major layoffs as an impending 2024 recession has been predicted by many economists. Many analysts are predicting silver will hit an all-time high in 2024. That's why you need to own silver as a hedge. Green energy demand will possibly turbocharge silver prices to $50, $100, even $300 an ounce, according to many experts around the world. Silver is a proven hedge against inflation. Since 1971, silver has returned over 11% when averaged yearly. Hard Asset Management is a trusted leader in precious metals and rare coins for nearly 40 years. We have the guaranteed lowest prices, fast and easy ordering, expedited shipping, with award-winning customer service available 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. CST, Monday through Friday. So protect yourself from the chaos. Invest in stability with Hard Asset Management. Call now and get your free Hard Asset Management information kit on how easy it is for you to own silver. 844-426-4653. Free delivery and extra silver with every $10,000 bought. Use promo code 007.
We're back, ladies and gentlemen, and with us again is Christian Briggs. I would say he's brilliant in his own right. If you find out that a lot of these conversations are kind of complex, replay them. It'll make it easier for you to digest a lot of really sensitive information, because that's how I come back at it, to be candid with you. Christian, I want to just ask you this very broad question. What do you suspect the world would look like where Neuralink is now a standard?
Hang on one second. Hold on one second, go back here. Okay, I was trying to respond to one of the congressmen. Go ahead, ask me one more time, Lou.
Yeah. I want to know what you think the world would look like if we start to incorporate this Neuralink as a new standard.
It is going to be a new standard.
No,
gonna
but
be
what do you think the world will look like at that point?
I think what you want to do is you want to kind of look at different films and science fiction that have come out. Look at Logan's Run, where they have limitations on the age limits of any individual. The understanding is that churches will become non-existent. There'll be no faith. There'll be no hope. There'll be only government viability. Government is going to be the new God. It already is with most of the left-leaning Democratic members and affiliates, and especially in Congress. Communism is a better way of living if you're the people based on their own theory. So they'll expand the Neuralink. They'll expand the Neuralink usage to include government use. And once it becomes mandated for travel and reprogramming people, especially under the guidance of they need it because medically they're not capable of governing their own affairs, it'll be a limited communication type world, and families will be permitted to have children based on the population or something thereof. It's everything that the Bible said it was going to be. It's going to be a new world order with a great reset of wealth inequality, and most people will be penniless but happier too, because they'll be programmed to be happy.
You know, I want to transition you both, Tom and you, into another conversation. And I know you guys have heard me redundantly remind everybody about this border situation. It's similar to you repeating on a fairly regular basis this concern about transitioning into digital currency and Briggs and all these other tangential conversations that are going to have a direct impact on our life and the amount of control the government will have over us. But you hear me talk about the borders, and I've been talking about them for more than 2 years that I've been doing these podcasts, and I've tried to explain to everyone the days that we're now experiencing, for example, in New York City, they've arrived. Okay, we didn't think they were coming; they're here. Give me your impression on this border issue. What do you see down the pike here? Who's supposed to benefit from this?
On the border?
Yeah.
The border's open borders. You have a context of people that are coming in the borders for one reason, and they're giving them government IDs, benefits to ensure that they can get through the system, have some meaningful life for the next couple of years. The government ID looks so perfect because it is a federal government ID. It's not one that would give you the right to vote because you got to be a U.S. citizen. But because we're going to areas now that include, like Pennsylvania, for example, all voters are immediately registered. They're registered from day one, which means you don't have to worry about it. They can just come to you, you show an ID. They're not going to look that hard to make sure that it's the real deal. And they'll say, oh, this looks good to me. And then they hand them a ballot, they fill it out, they sign it, they harvest it. And so now with open borders, which by the way, I believe was over 500,000 last month, they said 206,000 were conclusive, but then there was another 300,000, give or take, they estimated were the actual numbers. I mean, you're talking about coming over the borders, almost the population of Wyoming every month. So the open borders was to water down certain voters on the right, to increase voters on the left disproportionately and fraudulently in order to maintain the power grab that the Democratic Party and people within that party have deemed to be essential to the betterment way of life for everybody. How about those numbers?
Let me just ask you this. I mean, I have repeatedly said that I believe that the country's overpopulated. And I feel comfort in making that statement based on the fact that we don't seem to be able to take care of the people here. Now we're living in a condition in New York City, which happens to be my home. I was born and raised in the city, went to grammar school, high school, and college in the city. We can't take care of 120,000 migrants in New York City, which represents about a percentage of what's coming over through the border in Texas. Do you agree with my statement? We're overpopulated? And I want to come to you, Tom, with that as well in a second.
Well, technically, we're not overpopulated. What we're doing is we're underserving the population of the United States by increasing the population disproportionately with people who are bankrupting the system, who are creating the largest scale of dependency ever seen in world history. And that's what they're trying to do, is to collapse the economy, to create universal basic income through digital currencies. So if you take a look at the world's population, you could literally fit them all within the United States, and they'd all have 50 acres. So it's not disproportionately overpopulated. The U.S. is more than sustainable to feed and to house them. So what they're doing is increase the population, disproportionately put them in districts to blow up the Democratic districts so they have more voting representation in the House, and then thus they'll water down the conservative voter. And what they don't realize, though, is that the majority, scratch that, many, if not the majority of the people coming across the border are Latino, and they may be susceptible to certain things up front, but long term is they're more religious with the Catholics as well as the family unity than people realize. And once they're here in established residency and they become mainstream part of the population, they tend to go from what was to what is, and that is their culture. So I think that the long-term aspects, it may not be what the Democratic Party thinks, but at the same time, if they do gain control in certain footholds, they don't have to worry about the voters because they'll have enough of their people organized in the districts that matter. So I'll defer to Thomas on this because he's seen a lot more of this stuff in his days in the federal government at the agency. But I would say as a person from the outside looking in, yes, it is very scary at the beginning, but it may not be nearly as scary when you look at the long-term aspects of what could be.
So, Tom, you hear my statement that we're overpopulated. What do you think?
Actually, don't think we are. I think that our Constitution was designed to expand with the population as long as we maintain the control and maintain law and order, let's say, and stability in our society. But what's happened now is that we've undermined what we have. And I think if we had half the population and still had these prosecutors that won't prosecute it, funded by George Soros, if we still had these judges not wanting to convict anybody, if we still had these states that had basically catch and release at the state level, that anybody arrested for a serious crime are going to be back on the street before the police finish their paperwork. So I think that, you know, we've contributed to our own demise by being stupid, by not recognizing that we have people in our society that should not be on the street. They commit violent, sociopathic, psychopathic type crimes. When they're convicted, they should be incarcerated for a long time. They should not be back on the street 24 hours later or 1 or 2 days later. And I think that's where the problem is. So we see the decay in our cities because of the lack of prosecutions, the lack of support to the police. Next thing you know, the police leave, quit, retire, whatever they can do, because they're not being supported. And so I think, you know, that's part of the biggest problem here, is that activities by bad guys that would have been addressed and handled, and they would have been removed from the streets to where they could not prey on innocent people anymore, that's gone right now. And you've got other states wanting to adopt what New York has with the no bail, let the people out right away, no prosecution, nothing serious. And I think, you know, we're contributing to our own demise basically by contributing to that.
You know, Tom, I heard the both of you, and I still maintain that we're overpopulated, because the thing I've learned in life, as everything increases exponentially, the problems associated with that growth increase. And I want to just remind you of something, Tom. You and I were both born in 1951. We're a day apart. The population since our birth date has grown 200 million. And with that has the diversity of this country grown. The reality of the situation is, and everything you're saying is 100% true. We're not policing. We're degrading our institutions, including government, media, our law enforcement community, which makes it exponentially more difficult to police and to govern. But the reality of it is, less is always more in my world. You know, I built my company, so we're a boutique company, so the quality remains. I know this: if I grow this company and I increase the demand, my ability to supply people at the level of expertise I'm used to supplying people at is going to go down. You know, we're talking about who you got to look at who we're letting in the country right now also. And I'm not saying that in a derogatory fashion, but many of these people are from the third world, just for the record. And that's only one of the problems. The other problem attached to this is that we don't have the resources, Tom, and this is where I'm going with this thing about overpopulation. We don't have the resources to assimilate them, which does them a disservice, by the way. You and I both know there are 800,000 law enforcement agents, approximate, for 360 million people. We don't have the ability to vet them. We don't have the ability to deport them. We don't have the ability to assimilate them. See, that's why I think we're overpopulated. We should only populate this country in a manner at a pace that we can manage it. And I do understand what you're saying. Part of what you're saying is that maybe the reason we aren't overpopulated because we have the ability to manage. I don't think we have the ability to manage at this point, Tom. You know, we're looking at people coming into the country, and they migrate immediately towards New York to the tune of 120,000, which I have to tell you, when you think about the population of the city's 8.6 million people, doesn't sound like a lot until suddenly 25,000 of those individuals are students are being inserted in public schools without vaccinations. That's a management issue, right? We're not managing anything today. You know, I don't know how anybody, and I'm not being critical of you or Christian, can believe that we haven't overpopulated, because we've been demonstrating for a period of time now prior to this administration we haven't been taking care of our people. And I understand that might be systemic failure. I got the memo on this one, but I also think less is more. And I also know this: people that come to this country as a rule aren't heading towards Kansas and Nebraska and Missouri. They're going to the coasts, right? And we're seeing the impact in overpopulating the coasts. It makes it exponentially more difficult to manage, compounded by the fact that this government, and you're right, a lot of this is a failure of government to dedicate the resources, the time, and the efforts into properly managing this country. Part of it, you're talking about, deals with the prosecution of the criminal element. That's only one part of it, though, Tom. You know, we're at a condition, and this is so interesting because I talk about it all the time. You know, our schools, what has happened to this country that we cannot send our children into an academic environment without sending an armed person like myself or Tom Fuentes so that they are safe? No one speaks to what's happened to this culture. You know, and I do know we're having systemic failure. That's what you're talking about, Tom. Overall, that's what we're experiencing. But the way to minimize that is to have less people in this country so we can kind of scale down the trauma to the society that we're experiencing. We're all living in the same world. You know, I don't want to get into this whole political thing because you and I agree, and we spoke about this before we came on camera. Our conversations, Christians' conversations, are not driven because we're Republicans or Democrats. We love this country. We understand and appreciate this country, and I don't take it for granted. We're all worried about the young people here because they're the ones that are going to get flushed down the toilet. You and I are going to get out of this alive, metaphorically speaking. But the bottom line is, we need to change the conversation in this country and start to speak to many of these issues truthfully, as you just did, Tom. A big part of this failure to manage is the fact that we can't seem to prosecute anybody, but we can't seem to manage our borders.
Not that we can't seem to. We don't want to. We don't want to. We have people.
That's only on one side. But do you think that's
to do it?
Is that on both sides of the aisle, though, Tom? That we don't want to? Is that your opinion? That it's
who are the people running the prosecutor offices? Mostly Democrats, mostly funded by George Soros, in about the 20 largest cities in the United States, and they're not prosecuting people. And that's where one of the breakdowns right there. And that has a cascading effect of then the police know there's no point in making an arrest. The person won't be prosecuted. It just goes on and on. They don't spend even a night or two in jail. They're released back on the street with no bail requirements. And the cities are just going downhill because of that. Now, I just returned from 2 weeks in Europe, and the first 5 days was in London. And I was shocked because we walk around in London, Parliament Square, the whole area along the Thames River, all of these areas, took the subways, buses, taxis, and did not see one tent, did not see one homeless person on any sidewalk anywhere in that whole city. No sign of it. No excrement on the sidewalks, no needles on the sidewalk, none of that. Then we went to Brussels, same thing in Brussels. Then a suburb of Brussels called Ghent, which is a resort area, very wealthy. No sign of any problem there. That's where the FBI executive conference was being held. And then to Luxembourg, and the city of Luxembourg, same thing, immaculate. Come back here, you can't walk around any major U.S. city, anywhere in the country, and see that level of cleanliness, order, people that really should be in mental institutions, but instead they're laying on the sidewalk, shooting needles in their arm, doing everything they have to do on the sidewalk. And I think that, what is the problem? That the morons that run our country can't figure out how to make these cities clean and safe. And instead we have, I did 3 years in San Francisco as an assistant special agent in charge in the 90s. Beautiful city, one of the most beautiful in the world. I've been back since. It's gone to hell. And, when Gavin Newsom was mayor, you had this increase in homelessness, the fact that school kids can't walk down the sidewalks in downtown, stores are leaving the most richest areas in town where you had luxury stores, they're vacating it. Well, that wasn't good enough. Then he had to become governor of California and make sure the whole state is going down the drain. And now you hear that he's going to be the front runner for the Democratic presidency in the upcoming election. So therefore, we can expand the great accomplishments made in California. Let's do that nationwide. It worked out so well. So to me, it makes me angry to see our country put in the situation it's in right now by progressive left-wing politicians. They're doing this on purpose, and they're succeeding in the deterioration of our society.
Rare coin prices have exploded in the last 3 years. Hard Asset Management, one of the world's largest precious metals and rare coin dealer firms, makes recommendations on what to buy for collectors who know what they're looking for. We maintain one of the world's largest rare coin inventories for individuals seeking to diversify precious metals and rare coins. We can make strong recommendations in areas that we feel have the strongest potential for long-term growth. Call today, 844-426-4653 to receive our free Rare Coin newsletter, or register online at bmcham.com. Free delivery and extra silver with every $10,000 bought. Use promo code 007.
And Tom, just so everyone is clear, listening to Tom, if these were Republicans pulling these little capers, he would be equally vocal, just as I am. These discussions have no political attachment. It's very simple. They're either right or they're wrong. They're either truth or they're lies attached to them. And I say to the public, if you're content with what's going on your borders, you just have to listen. Your migration issue this past September, 260,000. August, 232,972. July was 183,000. If you're content with that, continue voting in the direction you are. I would never be so presumptuous as to tell you who to vote for. I also don't want to spoon feed you. I want you to become your own investigators in a sense. If you're content with what we're talking about in your major cities, that it is unsafe for you to travel to most of them. It's interesting, guys. Philadelphia has half the population of Chicago and has twice the homicide rate. And if you look at the crime stats in Washington, D.C., they're going through the roof. And I'm not saying this because I'm anti-Democrat, but the Democrats are running this. I'm trying to figure out what their end game is. If you're content with the fact that you're paying $2 more per gallon per gasoline, unless you're in California, which brings up Gavin Newsom once again. You're paying $7 a gallon in California. You know what his explanation was to Sean Hannity in post interviews? And I'm not a Sean Hannity fan, so let me be clear about that. Most people I know who are sane, rational, and reasonable aren't. And it's not because he doesn't say things that are truthful. His delivery stinks. He's a little too condescending, a little too smug. But let me tell you what Mr. Newsom explained. That $3 more per gallon or so that they're paying more in California, this is gouging by the oil companies. So when he was pressed, he acknowledged 85% of that amount represented taxes and fees tagged onto per gallon of gasoline in the state, about 85 cents. So where's the other $2.15? Oh, no, let me see if I understand this right, Gavin. The oil companies are only gouging California. Gasoline is $3.27 in some places in this country because I just drove by some service stations. This is also an individual that said to us in this interview with Sean Hannity the other night that we are energy independent. Please allow me to correct you on that one. Earlier this year, January, Chevron received permission from the United States government to import oil, dirty oil, I might note, from Venezuela. We are currently getting oil from Canada, Colombia, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, just to mention a few. If this is energy independence, then I'm the village idiot. I don't know what to say to everyone. Once again, and this term I'm getting really comfortable with, it's called the big lie. If it isn't oil if it isn't the borders, if it isn't this alleged transition to electricity, which, by the way, guys, you better wrap your arms around this concept. It's called nuclear. If you really want to get rid of fossil fuel, you have to look into nuclear energy, which begs the question, why aren't oil companies looking at a transition into that energy form? Like, divest a little bit, folks, because that's the answer. I want to remind everyone, all these steam turbines that charge your electric batteries are driven by fossil fuel and nuclear energy primarily, and then solar. And I'm a big proponent of solar and wind, which wind is not doing too well these days. And I'm not going to get into why. Another big lie, a gun control, Tom, you know, and I know, being on the front line, dealing with this almost on a daily basis. If you want to reduce crime, enforce the law. Don't add more gun laws for people who don't obey the law not to obey. Tying the hands of people that aren't the problem is not going to reduce crime. Enforcement will. By the way, while we're on the gun control topic, the other big lie. Why don't we start to do something called screening like Tom and I both went through? Minnesota Multiphasic, Word Association, Rorschach, interviews psychologists and psychiatrists. Why are we not putting the foot forward to try to fix some of these problems instead of just letting them perpetuate? I'm trying to figure out who's supposed to be benefiting from all these policies that we're living with today. And it just goes on and on and on. And so, Tom, I want to allow you to continue your conversation about your visit. And it's interesting because what's the population of London, Tom?
About 20 million.
Population in New York?
What's that, about 2 New Yorks, 2 or 3 New Yorks? And not to mention the population of London now, whites are not the majority anymore. So you have the various immigrants that have come into the UK, particularly into London, are Middle Eastern, African, Indian, Pakistani. They're from all over the world, and whites are now the minority in London. And walking around there and seeing the police, it wasn't a police state type situation. And we were walking around downtown London and on the subways at midnight, no problem. No fear that we were going to get thrown off the platform onto the tracks or mugged or beat up or hit with a baseball bat. Just a whole different environment. And I used to, you know, in my 30 years almost in the FBI, when I came back from these trips after seeing third world countries, developing countries, when I got off the plane in the United States, I practically kissed the ground. I was so grateful to be back in the USA. And now I look at this, and back in the USA means back in the danger zone. Leaving countries that were much more stable, much more secure, much more beautiful in that sense than coming back to this. And I don't care. And I know you've had strong feelings you've expressed about your hometown of New York City. I've expressed those about my hometown of Chicago or San Francisco, where I worked in the 90s. That was so beautiful. And to see all of these cities crash and burn deliberately, not because a hurricane hit or a meteor crashed into the United States, but because of the politicians that are running these places are morons.
Tom, I want to just say one thing about this next election. This is our defining moment. And as I just mentioned to everyone, if you're content with the borders, crime in your major cities, your economy, your foreign policies, we just gave another $6.5 billion to Iran, but they promised not to build a nuclear weapon. People don't understand we're in bed with the devil there. Then vote the way you've been voting, and you're going to inherit what you deserve pretty much. I want to ask Christian a quick question. What do you think it would take to rebuild our system and that will enable us to manage this, Christian? What do you think we need to do here at this point? And this is a problem-solving podcast, guys. Not only are we talking about the problems here, but we can offer you the solutions. The part that really upsets me the most, all these problems we're alluding to today are fixable problems. We just have to start to embrace the truth. But Christian, I know you heard my question I directed about rebuilding the system. What do you think it would take at this point?
Well, you have to get different leadership in without understanding that neighbors make great friends as long as they have great big fences in place. You're never going to have a secure country, a nation, because a nation without borders is not a nation, but really it's just a free-for-all. So you're going to need new policymakers. You're going to need individuals. It's individuals because government is based on individuals that understand that the makeup of America is not based on race, but by the cooperative understanding that everybody has a free shot, and being free is the key word, a free shot of great opportunity to become successful. No government handout is ever going to be able to make up for the uninvolved, the disenchanted, or the individual that determines or decides or has the arrogance to think that he is owed something for nothing. So with policymakers, you have to create great policy. That policy has to afford all individuals the opportunity of great success. When you start to segment or partition out one race over another, affirmative action, it turns out that less than 15% of college entries that are accepted into college, into Ivy League colleges, are white, and the rest of them are made up of other minority groups. That sounds great in theory, but what you're doing is, as the governor in Oregon did recently, they've eliminated all hurdles to graduate schools. There are no more tests. There'll be no more homework assignments. The illiteracy will not be eliminated. The literacy will continue to grow worse. So when you look at trying to make all people equal, let me tell you something. I'm almost 7 feet tall. You will not dunk a basketball better than me. That is not going to happen. I will not be able to do certain things because my height prohibits me. I will not be able to do certain things because I'm a male, not female. So you have to look at, we are not created equal. If we're created equal, then all people could do all things simultaneously, which is against the entire known way of physics. So the great way to do all these things and to change policy to make sure we ensure the viability for all is to create great policy that ensures the viability for all. And that means you can't section out. Ways have ways of working. And what that means is life will find a way to create the imbalances that we think we can make better, but nature has its way. It's just how it is. That's why God gave us fingerprints. We're all unique. So we all have something unique to give. We cannot be created equal in that sense, and we're not going to be made equal by government regulations.
Tom, I want to ask you, what's the way back?
Well, I think you have to start going back to the original premise that we should be a meritocracy. People should get promoted or get to be heads of agencies, get put into very important positions because of their capabilities, because of their character, because of their competencies. And we've gotten away from that. You know, I've made the comment before, if Martin Luther King was alive today, he'd be canceled. He would not be honored with a holiday, he'd be canceled. Because in his speech at the Lincoln Memorial, he said, men should not be judged by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. Well, now you have, you know, look at Gavin Newsom. He's picking Dianne Feinstein's replacement, and he says flat out it's going to be a black woman, and he's already named who it's going to be. Or you have Joe Biden picking people for cabinet positions based on their color, their sex, their ethnicity, all of these factors, none of which is competence as being the supreme necessity, let's say, that you're going to be the best and the brightest at what you do. We don't have that anymore.
I want to say one thing, Tom, you know, and I think you and I say this the same way. We want the best person. We don't care about your gender,
Exactly right.
your personal
Exactly
lifestyle. I don't care about your culture. I don't care about your ethnicity, your religious denomination. We need the brightest people to lead us. And I have one closing comment to you, Christian. I'm calling Michael Jordan. Okay. What'd you say about dunking?
I can dunk. I'm sure he can. I was talking about you guys.
Look, I could dunk, but wait a minute.
Well, are we talking 7 foot or are we talking about 10 foot?
No, I had springs, baby. I had springs.
Oh yeah, okay. Well,
I could get up, but I'm
that
calling
spring
Michael.
chicken's already left the hen house there, baby.
I'm calling Michael and telling him
Lou,
what you
next
said.
step is let's go to the pistol range together.
Guys, we're going to wrap it today. When we come back, we're going to continue these conversations about a myriad of topics: the United Auto Workers, what's going on in Texas, DNA. Tom and I had a conversation we're going to take up in the next episode about how to help manage this migration issue in a more orderly fashion and in a manner that we can account for people's activity. And by the way, the government has my DNA. They have my fingerprints. In fact, they've had my fingerprints for more than 50 years. Guys, thank you for joining us today. Tom, thank you. Christian, thank you. And we're going to be back, guys. Just stick with us. This is Operation Truth. You can contact us through operationtruthofficial@gmail.com. Please become part of this conversation. Critically important. Thank you for joining us today.
Hit the subscribe button and the notification bell right now so you never miss an episode of Operation Truth.